Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most critical things any company does, hiring. How exactly do they go from this absolute mountain of resumes to finding that one perfect person? Well, let's dive in and find out.
I mean, seriously, think about it. It is a massive challenge. For any recruiter, a single job posting can unleash a flood of applications. And finding the right person, that's not just about skills. It's about finding the right fit for the team, for the culture. And the stakes could not be higher.
And that is no exaggeration. The right person can literally supercharge a team and push a company forward. But a bad hire, that can lead to lost productivity, tanked morale, and real hard financial costs. So getting this process right isn't just a nice to have. It is absolutely essential for survival.
So here's how we're going to break it all down today. First, we'll talk about the high-stakes game of hiring itself. Then we'll walk through the key filters, the applications, the tests, and of course the interview. And finally, we'll look at how that final decision gets made and the crucial rules that govern the entire process.
Okay, so let's start with this idea of a high-stakes game. What does that actually look like in practice? Well, the whole process can be understood through one really powerful metaphor.
I want you to picture a funnel. At the very top, this wide opening, you have hundreds, maybe thousands of applicants pouring in. But at each stage, from screening resumes to phone calls to interviews, that funnel gets narrower and narrower, filtering people out, until at the very bottom, only one person emerges. That's the journey from the crowd to the candidate.
The very first filter, the widest part of that funnel, is the application itself. This is where the biggest cut happens. And you know what? A lot of the time, it's all automated before a human being ever even sees a resume. Yeah, most large companies use something called an applicant tracking system, or ATS. Just think of it like a digital bouncer at the door. It scans every single resume, looking for specific keywords and qualifications that the hiring manager has programmed in. If your application doesn't have the right words, you could be filtered out right then and there.
Now, beyond just the resume, the formal application is all about getting the basics in a standard format, which makes it way easier to compare candidates. But look at that last one, the applicant's signature. It seems so simple, but it's a really crucial step. It's you legally confirming that everything you've provided is true.
Okay, so once a candidate makes it past that first digital filter, we move into the testing phase. This is where companies try to gather some hard, objective data to really measure a candidate's potential for success.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? You can't just throw any old test at a candidate. For a test to be effective, to be fair, and, this is really important, to be legally defensible, it absolutely has to meet two critical standards.
The first one is called reliability, and it's really just about consistency. A reliable test is like an accurate bathroom scale. If you step on it 3 times in a row, it should show you pretty much the same weight every time. If a test gives you wildly different results each time, that data is basically useless.
The second standard is validity. This asks a different question. Does the test actually measure something relevant to the job? So, for instance, a typing test is totally valid for hiring a writer. Makes sense, right? But for a landscape architect, not so much. It tells you nothing about whether they can design a beautiful park.
And here's what validity looks like in the data. See the chart on the left? The test scores line up in this tight, upward-sloping pattern with actual job performance. That is a highly valid test. Now, compare that to the scattered mess on the right. That shows that college GPA is a much, much weaker predictor for this particular job.
So to get a whole picture of a candidate, organizations will often use a whole battery of different tests. They might use aptitude tests to see how quickly you can learn, achievement tests to see what you already know, cognitive tests for your reasoning skills, and even personality tests to get a sense of whether you'll fit in with the team.
All right. Anyone who makes it through the testing gauntlet moves on to what is often the most famous part of the process, the interview. This is where the human element really comes into play, adding a whole new subjective layer on top of all that data.
But, not all interviews are created equal. You have the non-directive or unstructured interview, which is basically just a free-flowing chat. It feels natural, but honestly, it's often unreliable and full of bias. On the other hand, you have the structured interview. Here, every single candidate gets the exact same set of job-related questions. This makes for a fair, apples-to-apples comparison that's way more valid and legally sound.
Now this is one of the most important things for both hiring managers and candidates to understand. There are some very clear, very bright lines that an interviewer cannot cross, all designed to prevent discrimination.
For instance, an interviewer can absolutely ask you if you can meet the required work schedule, but they can't ask about your religious holidays. They can ask about criminal convictions, but not arrests. The guiding principle here is really simple. Every single question has to relate directly to your ability to do the job, not your personal life or your protected status.
Okay, we finally reached the narrowest point of the funnel. All the data's in, from the application, from the test, from the interviews. Now it is time to bring all those pieces together and make a choice.
This final selection isn't just about a gut feeling. It's a systematic process. The team reviews all the data and applies a selection model. This could be a multiple hurdle approach, where you have to pass each stage to get to the next, or a compensatory one, where a fantastic interview might make up for a so-so test score. After that, they check references, and if everything lines up, the job offer is made.
So, to wrap this all up, let's just zoom out for a second and look at the legal and ethical guardrails that surround this entire process. Because these rules, they aren't suggestions, they are the law.
This whole hiring funnel is governed by laws. Things like the Civil Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act ensure that decisions are based on ability, not on things like race, gender, or disability. The entire process has to be proven fair so it doesn't accidentally screen out certain groups of people. And, of course, all your data as an applicant has to be kept confidential.
And that brings us to one final, really critical question for the future. We started this journey with automated systems like the ATS. As artificial intelligence gets more and more involved in hiring, from screening resumes to even predicting success, we face a new challenge. How do we make sure these powerful tools are actually eliminating bias instead of just learning our own biases and applying them faster than a human ever could? Answering that is going to define the future of work. Thanks for joining me.